This was a very serious violation of the NATO airspace. We are talking about 12 minutes of violation. Last time we saw it just before Estonia joined NATO, it was 2003. But now this is, the global situation is totally different. The regional situation is different. Just a couple of days before we saw a full-scale attack against Poland with 19 drones. And if you put it all in the pattern, so Russia is turning on the heat, Russia is testing more NATO.
When we talk about yesterday's case, then every situation is different. And of course we need to be proportional. So we look very closely. What is the route? How the airplanes are communicating with us? Do they react what we are telling them? What is their intention? What are the weapon systems they are carrying with? So there are many indicators we are looking at, and of course yesterday we were very confident that there is no need to shoot them down.
Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has decided that military escalation against Ukraine is the best way to force Ukraine to surrender on Russian terms. Putin feels emboldened after the Alaska summit and Trump's hesitation to act. Meanwhile, Russia continues to test NATO's defense by launching a full-scale hybrid war. Why does Putin feel emboldened to attack Ukraine, and what is the current Kremlin's thinking on Donald Trump? Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has decided that increasing military attacks is the best way to pressure Ukraine into peace talks on his terms, and that is Trump is unlikely to do much to help defend Ukraine, according to people familiar with Kremlin's thinking. Bloomberg reported. Russian forces have stepped up strikes on both military and civilian targets in Ukraine. The escalation began shortly after Putin met with Trump in Anchorage last month, where Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky rejected Putin's demand that Ukraine give up more territory in the eastern part of Ukraine. According to Bloomberg, Putin now plans to keep attacking Kyiv's energy systems and other key infrastructure. Their sources said the Kremlin sees this as the best way to force Ukraine to the negotiating table on pro-Russian terms. After the meeting in Alaska, Putin came away convinced that Trump had little interest in intervening in the war. In response to Russia's growing aggression, Trump has recently expressed frustration with Putin's tactics and suggested possible tougher sanctions against Russia aimed at cutting off all revenue. But at the same time, Trump has said that Europe must make hard decisions and take the lead before the US makes any new moves. Bloomberg reports that Moscow sees this hesitation from Washington as a green light for escalation. Kremlin officials believe the war of attrition could eventually wear down Ukraine's defenses and improve Russia's position in any future negotiations. Putin is trying to increase his leverage for the next round of negotiations about Ukraine whenever it happens. During the Anchorage meeting, Putin offered to pause fighting and freeze front lines in southern Ukraine, but only if Ukraine gives up part of two eastern regions that Russia has not yet captured. He also repeated earlier demands that Ukraine reduce the size of military and drop its plans to join NATO. Ukraine rejected those conditions, and according to Bloomberg sources, that rejection confirmed for Putin that stepping up attacks is the best way forward. Also, Russian President Vladimir Putin may have deliberately allowed Kremlin insiders to share his strategic thinking with Bloomberg in an effort to manipulate Western narratives, divide US, European allies, and spread fear inside Ukraine ahead of the coming winter, according to an assessment by the Institute for Study of War. In an analysis published this week, ECV cited a recent Bloomberg report in which Kremlin sources claim that Putin believes military escalation is the best way to force Ukraine into negotiations, and that former President Trump is unlikely to intervene. According to ICV, it is highly likely that Putin either orchestrated or approved these leaks to Bloomberg. The Kremlin maintains a tight grip on Russian information space and holds significant influence over most Russian officials. ICV noticed, suggesting that these leaks were not accidental but carefully calculated by the Kremlin, by allowing Kremlin sources to speak to prominent Western media. Putin likely aimed to exploit existing tensions between US and its European partners over the Ukraine war. The Kremlin's apparent focus on the Trump administration reported failure to change Putin's thinking may be a deliberate attempt to inflame divisions among Western allies and weaken support for Ukraine. The Kremlin has long sought to divide Ukraine's US and European supporters. Institute Study of War said, adding that this campaign has intensified since Trump's inauguration. According to the Institute, Bloomberg articles also serves as a broader Kremlin messaging objective to reinforce the narrative that a Russian victory in Ukraine is inevitable by framing Putin's escalation as a confident move toward ultimate victory. Moscow is trying to project strengths both internationally and domestically, despite mounting evidence of Russian military limitations and failures. Despite years of grinding war, Russia has failed to achieve its strategic objectives, including the full political control of Ukraine and decisive military victory. ICV has documented multiple instances where Putin tasked the Russian military with achieving goals well beyond its capabilities. Whether this reflects a failure of intelligence or reaching his personal disregard for military constraint is unclear. Regardless, ICV noted that pattern has allowed Kremlin to sustain a narrative that Russia can fight and win, regardless of cost. Importantly, ICV pushed back on that idea directly, quote, "A Russian military victory in Ukraine is not inevitable. Ukraine, the US and European states maintain agency over the outcome of the war in Ukraine." Meanwhile, 3 Russian MiG-31 fighter jets violated Estonian airspace on September 19th this year, flying roughly 5 miles into the country's territory near Windlow Island. The violation lasted for 12 minutes before Italian F-35 jets operating under NATO's Baltic Sentry mission intercepted the aircraft. Estonian officials described the incursion as unprecedented brazen, noting that Russian jets entered without filling flight plans, without transponders, and without communicating with Estonian air traffic control. In response, Estonia invoked Article 4 of the NATO treaty, which allows member states to request consultation if their security is threatened. NATO quickly condemned the violation as reckless and called for increased vigilance in the Baltic region, according to Reuters. Russia's defense ministry, however, rejected the allegation, claiming the jets remained in international waters throughout the flight and strictly followed international laws. According to Moscow, the aircraft were flying from Karelia to Kaliningrad and stayed more than 3 kilometers away from Estonian territory, with independent checks confirming no border breach. However, this incident is a part of a growing pattern of Russian airspace violations that have increased tensions in Europe. It follows a recent episode where more than 20 Russian drones entered Polish airspace, prompting NATO jets to intercept some of them. Western officials believe this provocation may be aimed at testing NATO's resolve and NATO's capabilities amid ongoing hostilities linked to the war in Ukraine. Several US and Western analysts view Russia's airspace violations as a test of NATO's response and political cohesion. The Washington Post and Foreign Policy highlight how Russia is probing NATO's limits of collective defense without provoking a direct military confrontation. Foreign Policy noted that these incursions, especially with the MiG-31 flight, are measured provocations designed to sow confusion, erode trust among allies, and undermine NATO's deterrence. US experts argue these actions aim to push NATO into political debates over response thresholds, potentially weakening alliance unity. New York Times underscores that Russia's strategy extends beyond kinetic military tactics to psychological operation targeting Western public. Russia's violations are framed as signals of strength, projecting Moscow's ability to act with impunity near NATO borders. Analysts say this information warfare sows fear and uncertainty in Baltic societies, reinforcing Kremlin narratives of so-called Western weakness. CNN and Reuters focus on long-term impact of this deterrence credibility. The swift NATO intercept of Russian jets and Poland shooting down drones are viewed as crucial steps in deterrence, yet analysts warn that Russia's growing boldness tests the alliance's strategic patience and may embolden further provocations. If NATO's response are seen as hesitant, several US think tank referred by The Atlantic and Deutsche Welle sees this incursion as an extension of Russia's larger effort to pressure Ukraine. The incursions reflect Moscow's frustration with the war stalemate and aim to stretch NATO's defense commitments, since distracting from Ukraine's front lines. Media analysis also points to Russia's attempts to exploit political dynamics in the US, referencing tensions around President Trump's approach as a part of a broader Kremlin strategy to weaken Western support. Commentators across US media, Politico and PR stress that these provocations underline the urgent need for NATO to bolster its eastern defenses and enhance intelligence sharing. That's all for today. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and glory to Ukraine!